I hooked up with a rock star twice my age and now I can't stop thinking about him. Background, I'm in my 20s, I'm fairly well established for my age with a good career, financially independent, and I have a small degree of online fame. I'm a model, so I know people find me attractive, and I am frequently pursued by people of all ages, and I'm generally attracted to older men. Daddy issues, I guess. I know that I can be a bit naive and overly trusting, but I can become unhealthily attached to people. The rock star in question is part of a popular band that has toured worldwide for years. I actually had never listened to their music prior to seeing them at a festival, so I didn't know anything about them and wasn't really starstruck by meeting them. The band is known for being provocative and for their playboy party personas. By pure chance, I ended up meeting them while out of character in between shows, and they invited me to hang out with them. I didn't fully realize who they were, and the one member in particular gave me a lot of attention off the bat. He's over twice my age, and I'm only 6 years older than his oldest child. Found him intentionally charming immediately, and we vibed really well. I quickly discovered that the stage persona was only 5% of the truth. By the end of the night and several tequila shots later, he had his hands all over me and we ended up back in his room. Side note, I have a personal policy of not sleeping with band guys. I know there's nothing special about it, but several other notable musicians at this festival had already tried with me and gotten turned down. I think it was different with him because I had met him just as a normal person and didn't know who he was. He started kissing me and things naturally progressed. I was initially a little reluctant because we ended up hooking up and it was probably the best of my life. He was an incredibly caring lover, and afterwards we snuggled and just talked and got really deep and personal. I really got the sense that he cared for me. He told me that he doesn't actually sleep around, and actually after getting divorced a couple years ago, he has only been with one person besides me. I found that pretty hard to believe, but why would he lie after the fact, right? And he told me a lot of personal things about himself and was very vulnerable. So I felt a lot of trust. I stayed the night and we hooked up again in the morning. And we lingered way too long while people were trying to get a hold of him because he had to prepare for the show that night. I left and he told me he wanted to see me again later. After I left, my psyche started to fall apart. I began searching for as much information as I could about him and the band, and I learned how desirable young girls find him. He has multiple fan pages, for crying out loud. I got very confused about whether I've been played or somehow was just special in his eyes. I was a ball of anxiety for the rest of the day, wanting to see him, talk to him, but not being bold enough to make the first move. I almost felt like he was avoiding me at times, but I'm extremely self-critical, and it may have been all in my head. I couldn't even enjoy the rest of the show. I did end up meeting him at his room again. We hooked up more and I talked a lot and I felt wanted and seen, and it was amazing. I stayed the night again and the next morning they were on the road again. He put his number in my phone and promised to call me whenever the band was in my area. I can't stop thinking about him now. I've never felt like this in my life. I'm not an overly sexual person personally, but I keep replaying our encounters in my head. I've texted him a few times since, but got short replies, and I don't want to bother him too much while he's touring. I'm trying to play it cool, but I feel so stupid catching feelings after a fling like that. The anxiety is disrupting me during my daily life and I don't want it to. I don't think my life will ever be the same after this whole experience. Isn't this the classic rockstar story? I'm pretty sure I've seen this movie on the Hallmark Channel. Oh well, hopefully this OP gets over this rockstar soon, but I'm curious if she's into his status, or maybe she just hadn't had good hookups before and is caught up on that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hate being a stay-at-home mom and wife. I wish I could save some money, pack up the dog, and one day get on a train and leave. They are both so needy. I sacrifice so much to make sure they are okay. I sacrifice myself and everything I've had when my husband dragged us into financial hell. I wish I could just leave them both, but the little one is chronically ill and the husband is mentally ill. He would freak out and scare our son if I left. He'd be a mess and unable to provide any sort of support. So I stay. And I clean, cook, and provide a decent home. I smile, and I tell them both, I love you. Inside, I feel rage, not at them, but at me. I'm a prisoner in my own body. I can't even bond with the dog because both son and husband get jealous. Why does the dog love you more? Why does he always follow you? Why doesn't he love me? I don't have higher education. I could totally live a humble life, just the dog and I. Hell, maybe I can finally get that newfound land I've always wanted. I don't want to go back into therapy anymore. I like who I am. I've always liked who I am. I've always needed to change because who I am doesn't work out for other people. I'm too demanding. I'm too high standards. I'm too forward. I'm too crass. Because of this, I drag my butt to therapy every couple of years. I can't smoke cigarettes. My husband doesn't like smokers, and mommy smoking would create a bad example. Anyways, that's all I have. I gotta get back to preparing lunch for tomorrow. This sounds like a tough situation to be in because a child is involved. If they were single, I would say get that bag and hightail it out of there. This wife is a stay-at-home mom, and it doesn't seem like she could take the child and leave because she probably doesn't have a financial leg to stand on. But at the same time, I'm curious if this OP thinks her family just isn't good enough for her, because she mentions how she has high standards, is demanding, and is crass as she says. So I don't know. What do you think? Is the OP a jerk? I abused a loophole in my high school student handbook to have 57 intentionally missed days waived so I could graduate early. I was one of those students. I took AP classes and gave zero effort and still passed. The one that would come in on Friday after intentionally missing Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and still pass a test with a grade A or higher. Never did any homework either. Overall grade at the end of every semester in most classes was a B-, but always had teachers mad at me over it because they had students that were truly struggling to maintain a C- after turning in all their homework, extra credit, and had near-perfect attendance. Even had my English teacher so mad that he tried to fail me by adjusting how much my missed homework counted towards my final grade. He actually got in trouble for that. Anyways, I accumulated 55 intentionally missed days my first semester of senior year. I was eligible for early graduation credit and grade-wise, but attendance of course made me ineligible. Or so I thought. My final semester of high school was going to consist of 4 periods 5 days a week, 2 BS classes and 2 attendance makeup classes. Me knowing myself, I knew this wasn't going to occur. I knew I would roll into that high school parking lot maybe once or twice a week and never make up any time. So I began trying to figure out how I could have these days waived, so I wouldn't have to make up so much time. I asked the school secretary what our attendance policy was and was given a copy of the student handbook, which of course was mentioned to me that we receive every year, but I had no idea where mine was. Big surprise. I skimmed through it and found out what qualified for waived days, and lo and behold, doctor's notes could waive up to 5 missed days a semester. I know that doesn't seem to help my case, considering I had over 50. However, there was additional text attached to that body of wording that said something along the lines of this. Any student who receives a diagnosis from a doctor stating chronic illness of any kind must have their days waived. So that's when the brainstorming started. I had a checkup scheduled at my primary doctor, received the doctor's note saying I was fine, photocopied it, and changed it to say that I had a mild form of chronic IDS, with the diagnosis dated back to the year before, and included the dates of previous visits, which I lined up with my missed days. I changed the phone number on the doctor's note to my grandfather's home phone number at the time. In hindsight, probably wasn't the best ideas, but it worked, I suppose. Took this to my school, and after multiple days of discussion and a phone call to my grandfathers, who had no idea what was going on, they were required to waive 57 missed days. I graduated 3 weeks later, a semester early, after missing 2 full months of high school intentionally. Now, there is a couple of edits on this story. Edit 1. The phone call that my grandfather answered was the day after I turned in the note. I waited until the end of the day to turn it in so I would have time to get home, and then intentionally missed the next day, anxiously waiting for a phone call to come in so I could attempt faking being the doctor's office. The phone call was regarding me missing another day of school. Imagine that, because my school always called when students didn't report to first period. It was not about the note, luckily. I thought I was boned for sure when he answered. Edit 2. I guess I needed to add it that this was years ago, not yesterday. Would be hard to get away with this in today's world. You know, I really want to dislike this OP because people who are naturally good at school and didn't have to study annoyed me growing up. But when I learned later on in life that people struggle with being creative, something I find very natural, I finally understood those types of people. So all I can do is raise a glass to this OP and wish that I thought of something this awesome to miss school. I used to steal from my dad every weekend and let my brother take the blame for it. When I was a kid, my dad used to roll all of his cigarettes by hand. Because of this, he would always have a stash of large tubs of tobacco and boxes of cigarette filters, but he kept it all together in a cabinet in our kitchen. When I was a freshman in high school, I thought it would be cool if I rolled myself some cigarettes and took them to school to smoke with my friends. Because I was always the first one home after school, I immediately reached for the necessary items in the rolly cabinet and set myself up. However, when I opened one of the cabinets of tobacco, I realized it wasn't tobacco. It was around an ounce of herb. Score! I didn't even know my dad smoked herb because he was still in the military at the time. I grabbed his Ziploc bag and took as much as I could without thinking it would be noticeable. To the inexperienced, it didn't seem like enough to notice. Looking back now, I know it was probably stealing anywhere from 2 to 4 grams each time. Not a large amount, but definitely noticeable, particularly to someone who scales out their stash each time they take from it. I should add that I was somewhat of the golden child in my family. My older brother just had graduated high school and was heavily addicted to drugs at this point and always did poorly in school and still lived at home, while I was the polar opposite. I played on sports teams for my school, had academic achievement awards, competed for my sport on a national level, never really been in trouble with my parents or school. So when my dad finally confronted us, me and my brother, about the missing herb, we both denied any involvement. It's also worth noting that he only confronted us when my mom wasn't home. My dad was the more chill parent versus my mom, who was very strict and also had untreated bipolar disorder at the time. Because I had a much better reputation with my parents, my brother took the brunt of the blame. Well, all good things come to an end, right? One weekend in sophomore year, there was a party as per usual, so when no one was home, I stocked myself up with some herb and got an older friend to buy me liquor. I asked my dad to drive me to my friend's house for the sleepover, so we could go to the party together. And on the way there, he lights up a smoke, except it doesn't smell like a normal cigarette. In fact, it doesn't smell like a cigarette at all. So I glanced from the corner of my eye and realized it was, in fact, a joint. And I pretended not to notice, just kept scrolling on my phone. To my surprise, and without saying a word, he reached his arm out and passed me the joint. I wasn't sure if this was a trap to get me in trouble, but I knew my mom was very explicitly against smoking herb. So I figured she also didn't know that he had it. I took the joint and puffed a couple of times, inhaled and passed it back to him without coughing. He just smirked at me and said, "Wasn't your first time, was it?" I just chuckled and said, "Maybe." At this point, he confronted me about the missing herb. My brother was gone for the weekend, and since my dad knew I was having a sleepover that night, he weighed his stash before leaving for work that morning. When I asked him to drive me, he weighed it again and noticed some was missing. Since my brother was gone and my mother didn't know, it was clear whose fault it was. He told me it was fine if I wanted to smoke up at parties with my friends, as he'd much rather have me smoking at parties than drinking. But he just asked me to stop taking so much from him every week. Apparently, it was costing them quite a bit to stay stocked up, and he was hiding it from my mom at the same time. So spending so much on something that he was trying to hide was getting increasingly difficult. As a corporal in the military, he wasn't making an overly abundant amount of money. He also told me to let him know privately if I've got weekend plans so he could hook me up with enough for me, but my friends were on their own. Fair enough. We agreed on this and we finished the joint together. He pulled up to my friend's driveway, and before I got out, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, let's keep this between us, alright?" And I always have, until right now, of course. Even after my mom started smoking herb too, I never told her, but maybe one day I will. Now she would probably find it hilarious. I wish this OP would have had an edit about what happened to the brother. I mean, to be honest, I'm glad his dad was cool about everything in the end, but his brother already being in a bad place and taking unnecessary blame could have messed him up even more. So yeah, kind of a jerk move in my opinion, because the OP thinks I got away with it, no biggie. Anyways, what do you think? Is the OP a jerk? I stole from the charity donation box for kids with cancer. Trigger warning, this post mentions eating disorders. When I was 15, my first job was working as a cashier at a pharmacy, and on the counter there was this little donation box, just your average give $1 to 6 kids charity. At the time I had anorexia. I was underweight and hadn't eaten in 3 days. I didn't bring any lunch or money to work that day, so I stole $20 from the donation box. This is not at all justification, but in the 8 months that I worked there, I just never saw it emptied, so I figured it would never go to the actual charity, or at least not for a while. I bought myself a bag of chips, the most sugary drink I could find, and a bag of lollies. Then I cried in the bathroom about how much of a crappy person I was to steal money to eat food. I've held on to that for 3 years, and I think about how lucky I am to have recovered now. I'm at a healthy weight and I love my body, but I don't think I will ever forget how much of a low point in my life that was, and I will never not feel crappy from stealing from kids with cancer. I'm glad that the OP is in a better place now with their health, and I feel like this could be an easy fix. I think everyone's done stuff they regret, but it's all about how you live life going forward. Why not make a nice little $100 donation to a cancer charity and call it even? Don't beat yourself up for wanting to eat. At least that's my opinion. My husband was supposed to be a one-night stand. I wasn't really looking to date, I just wanted some attention and passion. My roommates convinced me that to really move on from my ex, I just needed to have a one-night stand, which would help me move on and get back into the swing of things. And it had been almost a year since I had been with anyone. I didn't plan it or anything, but the company I was working at the time did a monthly game night, so I went. But now my husband and I were on the same team and we were flirting a bit. I was planning on resigning the following Monday as I had received a better offer, so I figured why not and decided to try my luck with seducing him. He came with me back to my place and well, you can guess what happened. Things kind of evolved from there, but I never really told my husband that he was supposed to be a one-time thing. I guess my seduction skills worked. Together 11 I guess my seduction skills worked. Together almost 11 years now, married for 9, 4 kids, a house, and a dog and a cat. I don't really have much to add here, but I do have a question for you viewers. Do you think the husband would get mad if she told him the truth? Or would he just laugh it off because in the end they still ended up together? Reminds me a lot of a Friends episode. So that's it for today's episode. Let me know your favorite story in the comment sections down below. Don't forget to follow on Spotify and hit that subscribe button if you want more content like this in the future.